Chapter 24 Into the Eastern Wastes. The winds grew colder as they descended from the forge, the dense forest stretching out before them like a vast, ancient maze. Azural, Talvar, and Soraya pressed on, their faces set with purpose, the weight of their journey pulling them toward the eastern wastes. A place shrouded in mystery and darkness, where Vyuva's influence was rumored to linger still. With each step, the forest around them seemed to darken, the path twisting beneath thick canopies that blocked out the sun. Azural felt the fire within her stir, a steady warmth that grounded her against the eerie chill in the air. She glanced at her companions, noticing the silent determination in Talvar's gaze and the haunted expression that had settled in Soraya's eyes. Their journey led them to the edge of a small village nestled at the forest's edge, where they stopped to gather provisions. The people of the village regarded them with a mixture of awe and fear, their eyes lingering on Azural's faintly glowing aura and Talvar's ever-watchful stance. As they moved through the marketplace, a hunched old woman approached Soraya, her voice a hoarse whisper. "The eastern wastes are cursed," she warned, her bony fingers clutching Soraya's sleeve. "Many have entered, but none have returned unchanged. Be wary, child. Shadows dwell there that feed on even the strongest of spirits." Soraya stiffened, her gaze meeting Azural's across the crowd. Azural nodded, understanding the unspoken resolve in her companion's eyes. This was a journey they would have to face, no matter the warnings. As they crossed the border into the eastern wastes, the landscape around them transformed. The once verdant forest gave way to desolate plains, the earth cracked and barren, twisted trees standing like skeletal hands reaching toward the sky. The air was thick with a sense of abandonment, as though even the sun itself had turned away from this forsaken land. "This place was once alive," Soraya murmured, her fingers brushing the brittle bark of a twisted tree. "But Vyuva's magic twisted it, left it hollow. The power here, it runs deep." Azural felt the fire within her pulse, a defiant warmth pushing back against the oppressive weight of the wastes. She tightened her grip on her staff, the blue flames flaring briefly, casting an eerie light that cut through the mist. "Then we'll use that power to end him." They continued in silence, the bleak landscape stretching endlessly before them. Shadows seemed to shift at the edges of their vision, moving like ghosts just beyond reach. Talvar's hand never strayed far from his sword, his gaze alert as he scanned the horizon. Suddenly the ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble that grew louder with each passing second. Dark figures began to rise from the cracked earth, their forms shadowy and formless, eyes glowing with a sickly light. Talvar drew his sword, his stance defensive as the figures advanced. "Stay close," he said, his voice a steady anchor against the encroaching darkness. Azural felt her flames ignite, the fire wrapping around her like a protective shroud. She faced the figures, her voice calm but resolute. "Whatever these shadows are, they won't stop us." The creatures lunged, moving with unnatural speed. Talvar swung his sword in wide arcs, cutting through their forms, only for the shadows to reform moments later, their laughter a low, mocking echo. Soraya stepped forward, her hands raised as she summoned a barrier of light, her magic intertwining with Azural's fire, creating a radiant wall that pushed the creatures back. "They feed on fear," Soraya murmured, her voice steady. "Stand firm. They can only harm us if we let them." Azural nodded, feeling the strength of her companions beside her. Together they advanced, their combined power forcing the shadows to retreat, their forms dissipating into the mist. The ground fell silent once more, the air thick with the scent of burned earth. They continued their journey, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the eastern wastes. The terrain grew more treacherous, the path winding through narrow ravines and jagged cliffs. The oppressive weight of Vyuva's influence hung over them, an invisible force that pressed down on their spirits. As night fell, they found shelter beneath a rocky outcrop, their campfire casting flickering shadows on the barren landscape. Azural sat by the fire, her gaze distant as she watched the flames dance, her thoughts heavy with the weight of the prophecy that had brought her here. Soraya settled beside her, her expression thoughtful. "You've come far, Azural," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet respect. "More than most would dare." Azural looked up, meeting Soraya's gaze, her voice a murmur. "I didn't have a choice. This power, this prophecy, I can't ignore it." Talvar joined them, his gaze steady as he took in their expressions. "We're here because of you, Azural," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Azural felt a warmth settle within her, the strength of their unity, a balm against the fear that gnawed at her heart. She looked at her friends, a sense of gratitude filling her as she realized she was not alone in this fight. For the first time, the weight of her destiny felt less like a burden and more like a shared purpose, a bond forged in fire and trust. They rested in silence, each lost in their thoughts as the fire crackled between them, its light a small but steady beacon against the darkness that lay ahead. As dawn broke, they resumed their journey, the landscape growing darker and more twisted with each passing mile. Azural could feel the fire within her stirring, a primal force urging her forward, guiding her toward the confrontation that awaited. She knew, deep down, that the final battle was drawing near, that Viova's stronghold lay somewhere within the shadows ahead. As they crested a ridge, the ruins of an ancient city spread out before them, its stone walls crumbling, overgrown with twisted vines. At its center, a towering fortress rose, its dark spires reaching toward the sky, a beacon of shadow against the morning light. "This is it," Soraya murmured, her voice filled with a quiet dread. "The heart of Viova's power." Azural took a steadying breath, her gaze fixed on the fortress, her flames flaring in defiance. "Then let's end this." With Talvar and Soraya at her side, she descended into the ruins, her heart pounding as they approached the final battleground, each step bringing them closer to the confrontation that would decide the fate of the world.